2/3 of Americans claim Social Security before their full retirement age. The financial media treats this like a mass failure of judgment, like 60 million people are leaving money on the table because they never learned basic math, like the correct answer is obvious and the people choosing early are simply uninformed. That framing is wrong, and the cost of believing it, of treating delayed filing as universally correct without examining your actual situation, can be genuinely significant. Here's what the conventional narrative skips. The math that makes waiting look obviously superior is built on a set of assumptions about your life. It assumes you'll live long enough for the larger payments to add up to more than what you'd have corrected earlier. It assumes you don't need the income now. It assumes your health is stable and your family history suggests longevity. It assumes your spouse's financial picture doesn't depend on when you file. It assumes you have other resources to draw on while you wait. For some people, every one of those assumptions holds. For others, several of them are simply not true. And when the assumptions don't match the reality, the advice built on them doesn't either. My name is William. Today, we're going through 7 legitimate reasons why claiming Social Security at 62 might be the right financial move for your specific situation, not as rationalizations, not as excuses for impatience, but as real strategic considerations that professional financial planners use when building retirement plans for actual clients. First, the numbers, because you need the baseline before any of this makes sense. For anyone born in 1960 or later, full retirement age is 67. That's when you receive 100% of your primary insurance amount, the figure calculated from your highest 35 years of earnings. File at 62, 5 years early, and your benefit is permanently reduced by approximately 30%. A $4,000 monthly benefit at full retirement age becomes roughly $2,800 at 62. Wait until 70 and delayed retirement credits push your monthly benefit to 124% of the full amount. That same $4,000 becomes approximately $5,200. The spread between filing at 62 and filing at 70 can exceed $2,400 per month at the maximum benefit level. The break-even calculation is where most people start and stop the analysis. If you compare filing at 62 versus 67, you break even around age 78. Filing at 62 versus 70, the break-even lands around age 80 to 81. What those numbers mean, if you file at 62 and live past 80, you would have collected more total lifetime dollars by waiting. If you file at 62 and pass away at 76, you come out ahead by tens of thousands. The Social Security Administration designed the system so that people who live to average life expectancy collect roughly the same total benefit regardless of when they filed. The monthly amounts are calibrated to produce approximately equal lifetime payouts at average longevity. The decision is really about how those dollars are distributed across time and whether the distribution that looks better on a spreadsheet actually fits your life. Here are 7 situations where the earlier distribution is the right answer. Reason 1. Your filing unlocks income your spouse is currently blocked from receiving. This is the most consistently overlooked strategic consideration in the entire Social Security filing conversation, and it catches people off guard because the individual optimization feels so obvious that the household picture gets ignored. Your spouse cannot collect spousal benefits until you file for your own retirement benefit. That's not a detail, it's a structural feature of the system. If your spouse worked fewer years, earned significantly less, or doesn't qualify for a meaningful benefit on their own record, they're waiting on you. Spousal benefits can reach 50% of your full retirement age benefit. For households with a significant earnings disparity, that number is substantial. Every month you delay to maximize your own payment is a month your household collects nothing from your spouse's spousal entitlement. Here's how the math actually plays out. You're 62 with a strong earnings history. Your spouse is also 62 with minimal work credits. You decide to wait until 70 to maximize your benefit. Your spouse waits 8 additional years before receiving a single dollar of spousal benefit.
You've optimized your individual monthly check while your household income goes without a second stream for nearly a decade. The right question isn't what maximizes my benefit, it's what maximizes our household's total lifetime income. Those are frequently different questions with different answers, and the household answer sometimes points directly toward filing earlier than the individual analysis suggests. Reason 2, your health history makes the break-even math work differently for you. Nobody wants to sit down and realistically assess their own mortality, but retirement planning that refuses to engage with life expectancy isn't optimism. It's a spreadsheet that doesn't reflect reality. The average American who reaches 62 can expect to live approximately 22 more years. That average puts life expectancy around 84. But averages conceal enormous variation. Half of people live shorter lives than that average. If your family history suggests early mortality, if you're managing significant chronic conditions, if your health picture is genuinely different from the statistical average, your break-even calculation is different too. The break-even between filing at 62 versus 70 sits around age 80 to 81. If your realistic life expectancy is closer to 75 or 76, the math doesn't favor waiting. The larger monthly check you'd receive from 70 onward would never accumulate enough to surpass what you'd have collected from 62 forward at the smaller amount. Social Security was designed as insurance for your retirement. If your retirement will realistically be shorter than average, the insurance should pay out sooner, not because you're giving up, but because you're planning accurately instead of planning for a statistical average that doesn't describe your situation.
Reason 3. Your spouse has a shorter life expectancy and a higher benefit, and the survivor math favors filing early on your record. This is a more sophisticated version of the longevity analysis, and it requires honest conversation between spouses, but the financial case is compelling for the right circumstances. When one spouse dies, the surviving spouse can claim the deceased's benefit if it's larger than their own. That survivor benefit is based on what the deceased was actually receiving at death. Here's one scenario where early filing makes strategic sense. Your spouse has a significantly higher lifetime benefit, but a serious health condition that suggests a shorter life expectancy. You file for your own benefit at 62 and collect that income while you're both alive. When your spouse passes, you switch to their survivor benefit, which was higher than what you'd have received on your own record regardless of when you filed. You've collected income from 2 records across the timeline instead of optimizing just one of them. The reverse also applies. If you have health concerns and your spouse has longevity on their side, filing early on your lower record gives your household income now, while your spouse delays their filing to maximize both their own future benefit and, if they outlive you, your survivor benefit too. The system has more moving parts than most people realize. Running the analysis on a single record in isolation misses the coordination opportunities that can substantially change the total household outcome. Reason 4. You've stopped working, you have significant assets, and drawing on Social Security early protects your portfolio. This one surprises people because it seems counterintuitive. Why would someone with substantial retirement savings claim early instead of waiting for a larger benefit? The logic is about portfolio protection, not income need. When you retire and stop working, your assets need to fund your expenses. Every dollar you withdraw is a dollar that stops compounding. If you claim Social Security early and use those payments to cover a portion of your living expenses, you reduce the amount you need to pull from your portfolio each month. Your investments get more runway to grow. Over 8 years, the gap between filing at 62 and filing at 70, the additional compounding on a portfolio that's being drawn down less aggressively can exceed the benefit of the larger delayed Social Security payment. The math depends on your portfolio size, expected returns, tax situation, and longevity. But for people with meaningful assets who have genuinely stopped working, this is a real calculation worth running. There's a secondary benefit called sequence of returns protection. If the market drops sharply early in your retirement while you're withdrawing heavily to cover expenses, the damage to your portfolio can be permanent and severe.
Having Social Security income as a baseline, even a reduced one, means you need to liquidate fewer assets during downturns. You preserve more shares to participate in the eventual recovery. The smaller monthly Social Security check buys you something that isn't visible in a simple benefit comparison. It buys your portfolio time. Reason 5. You want to invest the early payments, and you have the discipline and track record to do it. Some people claim at 62 specifically to invest the payments rather than spend them. The logic is straightforward, even if the execution requires discipline. Filing at 62 instead of 70 gives you 8 additional years of payments. Each individual payment is smaller, but you can deploy them into the market. If your investments return more than the approximately 8% annual guaranteed increase you'd receive by waiting, and if you live long enough for the compounding to accumulate, the invested early payments can outperform the delayed filing strategy. This carries real risk. Markets don't return 8% every year on a predictable schedule. Some years they drop significantly. If you invest early Social Security payments through a severe downturn, you may have given up the guaranteed delayed credit for speculative returns that didn't materialize. But for experienced investors who understand what they're doing, who have the emotional discipline to stay invested through volatility, and who don't need the Social Security income for daily expenses in the first place, this approach has a legitimate financial case. You're making a bet that your investment skill and risk tolerance produce better outcomes than the guaranteed credit for waiting, and for some people, that's a reasonable bet to make. Reason 6. Another guaranteed income stream is coming, and Social Security bridges the gap until it arrives. If you know that a pension, annuity, or other reliable income source will begin within the next 3 to 7 years, your Social Security calculus changes entirely. The conventional case for delaying Social Security is partly about building a higher income floor for later life. But if your income floor is already being built elsewhere, through a pension that kicks in at 65, a deferred income annuity that starts at 67, a business sale that generates a structured payout, you don't need Social Security to perform that function. In that scenario, filing at 62 gives you real income during the gap years between stopping work and your other guaranteed income beginning. Once the pension or annuity starts, Social Security becomes supplemental rather than foundational. You've collected from both streams across the full timeline, rather than waiting on one while the other hasn't started yet. The key question is whether you can cover the gap years from savings without meaningfully damaging your long-term financial picture. If yes, waiting still might make sense. But if claiming early smooths your income trajectory without requiring significant portfolio withdrawals, it's a structurally sound approach that deserves consideration rather than dismissal.
Reason 7. You cannot work and you need the income. Use the benefit you've paid for. Sometimes retirement doesn't happen on the schedule you built for it. Decades of physically demanding work, construction, nursing, manufacturing, agriculture, take a documented toll on the body. By 62, chronic pain, joint deterioration, or accumulated physical damage makes continuing genuinely impossible. This is not a failure of planning, it's a reality of what certain work costs. Sometimes it's the labor market rather than the body. Age discrimination in hiring is illegal and extremely difficult to prove. The practical reality is that many workers in their early 60s, particularly those who experience a job loss, struggle to find comparable employment, regardless of their qualifications or work history. If you've genuinely exhausted the alternatives, explored different work arrangements, considered less physically demanding roles, attempted to draw down savings to bridge a shorter gap, and the conclusion is that continuing to wait isn't realistic, claiming Social Security is the system working exactly as it was designed to work. There is no financial shame in using a benefit you spent 30 or 40 years paying into. The system exists for this. Using it when you need it isn't a planning failure, it's the plan. The situations where early filing is clearly wrong. If you're still working and earning meaningfully above the annual earnings limit, currently $24,480 for 2026, filing early creates a specific problem.
Social Security withholds $1 for every $2 you earn above the threshold while you're below full retirement age. You take a permanent 30% reduction in your benefit and then have payments withheld because your income exceeds the limit anyway. You've accepted a permanent cut for payments you can't fully collect. The math doesn't work. If Social Security will be your primary or only retirement income, the case for waiting is significantly stronger. When every dollar of monthly benefit is load-bearing, when the difference between $2,800 and $4,100 a month is the difference between comfort and difficulty, the higher payment matters enormously. Work as long as the body and circumstances allow. Delay as long as delay is realistically sustainable. If your health is strong and your family history suggests meaningful longevity, the statistics favor waiting. Living past 81 means the higher payments eventually accumulate more than the earlier smaller ones would have. What to actually do before you make this decision? Log into your Social Security account and pull your actual benefit estimates at 62, 67, and 70. Know the real numbers you're working with, not approximations. Assess your health honestly. Look at your family history. Look at current conditions. Talk to your doctor. Use that information in the analysis rather than defaulting to the average. If you're married, model the household picture, not just your individual benefit. The coordination between two filing strategies, two health profiles, and two benefit records often produces answers that single record analysis misses entirely. Map your other income sources. The role Social Security needs to play in your retirement depends entirely on what else is there. Foundation versus supplement produces completely different optimal filing strategies. And if the analysis feels complex enough that you're uncertain, work with a fee-only financial planner who can model your specific numbers. A few $100s in professional fees can redirect tens of thousands in lifetime benefit decisions. It's one of the highest return professional consultations available to someone approaching retirement. 2/3 of Americans file before full retirement age. Some of them are making a mistake. Many of them are making the most rational decision available given their actual lives, their actual health, their actual households, and their actual financial picture. The decision about when to claim is not about what looks best on a generic spreadsheet. It's about what fits the reality of who you are, how long you're likely to live, and what your household actually needs. The right answer isn't always wait. Sometimes it's exactly the opposite. If this changed how you're thinking about Social Security, or if it gave you a framework to have a more honest conversation with your spouse or your planner, subscribe for a new video every week. We cover the financial decisions that actually matter, with the math behind them, without the oversimplification. Drop your situation in the comments. How are you thinking about the filing decision? Early? Late? Still figuring it out? The conversation down there is usually worth reading.